Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. This gentleman has been an inspiration to many who are planning their career. And what he's done has affected millions of people. I can honestly say that over the years as a urban and regional planner at the University of Pittsburgh. Those decisions that are made by people like himself in his field affect so many in their everyday daily life. We're going to talk with him again today. He's our man of the year. Richard Golden Bickel Jr. is back on the program. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Very good. Thanks, Steve.
I've got a completely unrelated question to what you do. Golden, Richard Golden Bickel, your name. Where does the golden come from?
I believe it's a Scotch name that my father had, and I'm a junior, so that's about all I know.
Wow.
It is unusual.
So is that a middle name?
Oh, yes, Richard Golden Bickel Jr.
Wow.
I mean, me, and he was Richard Golden Bickel.
Wow. I assumed it was a middle name. I've never heard the name before, but then I wondered, well, maybe there's something else going on there. Wow, how interesting. And even listen, I totally hear what you're saying. I have other names attached to mine legally. I don't even know what my parents were thinking. Where did that even come from? But I guess we'll never know. But you know what? It makes you stand out. And maybe that's, maybe that was the goal way back in the day, even before, your father was born, of having that name Golden as a middle name. Very cool. Very different. All right. I want to dig in here. And this is from Justin, who checks in from Ocala, Florida. By the way, you can always reach us, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. He says, I'm considering a career in urban planning. What would you say should be the focus? Transportation, land, urbanism, sewer systems? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, starting out in the profession, I think you should look at all those aspects and decide which specialty you like the most, and that could help shape your continuing education program, and also what you might find as a career, and or the first job that you get, which is very important.
For you, in decades of doing this, were there, Richard, some areas that you gravitated more toward, like you just had a more of affinity for, maybe it's land development, maybe it's transportation? Any one of those categories pique your interest?
Well, when I started at the University of Pittsburgh as an undergraduate and then a graduate student in the urban and regional planning program, I was involved in projects that involve local governments and land use issues. Transportation was not necessarily the focus, but I learned about transportation. And later on in my career, when I went to work at a regional planning commission and then also a public transit agency, transportation became the dominant side of my agenda, and the land use side was still important, but it was a little less so than when I started at Montgomery County, Pennsylvania Planning Commission, where I was a local planner, going to night meetings and meeting with local officials and talking about comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances and subdivision plans. So that's sort of the shift that occurred over the 40-plus years.
Wow. We've talked about this before, but I'm intrigued about the projects that you were involved in. Would you be able to share, a project that stands out for you?
Well, the working at the Regional Planning Commission, developing a long-range plan of 20 years for a 9-county region in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, focused on Philadelphia. That was helpful. and very, very important. And when I worked at SEPTA, we did a lot of projects that were related to transit development, and those I found very interesting and also helped to draft some legislation that was eventually adopted called the Transit Revitalization Investment District, which authorizes transit agencies to work with counties and local governments to plan development around rail stations or public transit hubs, and that was very rewarding.
How about the studies that go into a lot of the planning? Like, for example, you have different states with different speed limits, 55, 65. Just, I'm using that as an example, but how deep does it go into the studies, the research before something is changed within a municipality or even something is built?
Well, the studies that are done at the regional level are under federal requirements, and good planning practice or engineering requires looking at the demographics of the area, the population and employment, forecasting that out to 10 to 20 years to see which way the trends are going. Is it a growing area? Is it a stagnant area? Is it a depressed area that needs revitalization? And that helps to shape the plans that are being developed and also the kinds of projects that are proposed. The infrastructure projects can be a catalyst for revitalizing communities and attracting development. And that important linkage between land use and transportation is critical if you're going to try to plan for the future. Similar to the things that are going on right now, I'm talking about revitalizing Penn Station and other major development hubs.
What about housing? And I've been hearing that in Philadelphia, I believe it was, that a lot of the lawmakers are bouncing back and forth on initiatives in the next budget in terms of housing and planning in that area. What's your overall view of what's going on now in our country?
Well, I think housing is a critical need, and it varies by region in terms of the kinds of development that's being proposed. But the bottom line is we need more housing units. At the moment, there are areas that are very well located and have population that is wealthier, and they're not as they don't have the need that some other areas have, where they have a lot of population growth and yet not enough housing units at an affordable price to accommodate their residents. And the conflict that arises is that the people say, oh, affordable housing. I don't want affordable housing in my backyard. And that's the famous or infamous NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard. And at the same time, if you don't develop these new uses close to where existing development is, you're creating gaps for transportation and access and just making the problem worse.
I understand what you're saying. And back in the day when they used to say affordable housing, people would get a picture of what that could look like, the people that may be living in those housing units, et cetera. It's changed. It's not, when they say affordable housing, it's a little bit cheaper, maybe, than it is, with the average price. Because there was a lottery. I'm on Long Island, New York. There was a lottery of some new units that opened up, and I took a look at them, and they say they're affordable. What's affordable? the market price for a 2-bedroom apartment in this region is probably about 2,500, maybe 2,800, and affordable is I don't know, maybe 2,300. So it's not right.
You're talking about monthly rents?
Correct.
Yeah, I think in New York City it's up to like 3,500 or more.
Oh, yeah. On Long Island, you get a 3-bedroom apartment in a complex, 3,500. Long Island, not even the city. So my point is, quote unquote affordable housing may be a little bit cheaper than the average going monthly rate, but it's, the NIMBY thing, I get it, because back in the day, I used to hear that term, and you would think that, these are economically challenged families that are moving into these homes, and they're making them available for people in those situations. That's not what affordable housing is anymore. I mean, the average person has some challenges paying, $2,800 a month in rent for a two-bedroom apartment right now.
Right, and in a time of rising costs and potential for stagflation or a recession, you've got to look at the overall cost in relation to consumer products and expenses,
yep,
and not just housing by itself. It's all interrelated.
100%. And what's going on in many municipalities there are a few companies big companies that are swallowing up these independently owned complexes, and they're setting the price. They're setting the price. And then everybody else follows along. Jake in Bangor, Maine checked in instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com and says, what is the difference between an urban planner and a city planner?
I would say it's just convenient terminology. It's when I started school in 69 and 70, I think people used the term city planner a lot, but that sounds too urban. Urban planner sounds a little broader, and that's a term that I would prefer to use as a planner, not just city planner, because city planner right away sounds like you're working for Philadelphia.
Right.
And urban planner, you could be working anywhere.
I totally get what you're saying there. You just put the word city in there, and what's a city? I mean, I got, a well-known village nearby me at this moment. Would you call that a city? Some people would. It's a relative term. Do urban planners eventually develop a specialty in terms of what they do, as years go on?
Yes, I think so. I started out in basic community planning and ended up spending more time in regional planning and also transportation-related projects. I was not an engineer, and I didn't get involved in the nuts and bolts of some of the projects, but the location of where they go and how they influence economic development or redevelopment is critical. So I ended up working on those kinds of things that affected transportation, and also that transportation affected the projects.
When we look at somebody starting out, is there the opportunity for maybe interning for a portion of the initial years?
A lot of private sector companies and also local governments or county governments have internship programs, and it would be worth looking into if you're thinking about applying for a job, and also taking opportunities to do internship-related work even when you're a student, if you can, and if a program is available. Because there's nothing better than things you learn in your books or lectures, but adding real-world experience working in an office and seeing what goes into developing a plan or a project at that level.
When you look back at those years, 4 decades, I know there's a lot of pitching of ideas and there's a lot going on dealing with the public, but also the political side of it, call it political maneuvering, where you got to kind of duck and weave, to get things done. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being there's a lot of political connections here. You got to maneuver and deal with. For you, where would you put it on that 10 scale?
Well, I was fortunate in working at an established county planning agency adjacent to Philadelphia, where the elected officials and my planning director were all in a line on what our goals were to develop the county, and that helps. But if you're in a private sector firm, you may be assigned a project in one state or another state, and you've got to adapt to the different rules and regulations that govern planning in those areas, and you have to be careful to make sure that what you're recommending is reasonably related to the predominant political perspective. And obviously, when planners deal with projects that cause controversy and differences of opinion, if you're not aware of where the landmines are, you may walk into a situation where you're proposing something that you think is great, but find out that it's not publicly accepted. That's why planning requires an education component, working with local officials and especially the public.
Now, you mentioned Philadelphia. I heard about a $2 billion proposal. I think they call it Housing Opportunities Made Easy, which spells out home. And it's, like we talk about, it's an ongoing crisis with housing, but they're looking to borrow $800 million in bonds to fund lots of different programs with basically one goal, preserving 30,000 units of housing. And they were trying to get that passed for a budget by July 1st. That's 30,000 units and $800 million and part of a $2 billion proposal. It's great, 30,000 units, but it seems like that number would be higher with these numbers. What are your thoughts?
Well, the city, the mayor and the city administration have an ambitious goal to expand housing within the city and also deal with the issues of redevelopment and preservation of the existing units. And so it's a multi-pronged approach, and I think it's very commendable that she's got this initiative to help expand the housing stock, and also for an older city like Philadelphia with so many existing units, you've got to have a preservation component, and that's also important.
Let's flash back. Let's look back. I don't know, maybe 30 years, and where we are today. What do you think? And I'm going general here. Could be Philadelphia. Could be maybe New York. Could be Detroit. Wherever. Overall, broadly, 30 years ago, what do you think they could have or should have done different to make things better today? Now, and you can't forecast the exact population increase, but you have ideas. Is there anything that you think overall could have been done differently when it comes to housing?
I think the implementation obstacles for affordable housing and the acceptance of those kinds of units in communities could have required an earlier effort to define what it really means why it's important, how it relates to the demographics of the community, the employment and the population, and it would have required a much more concerted effort to educate the public and to get over the feeling that anything that costs a little less than the prevailing housing cost is not desirable. Communities have different economic levels within their boundaries, and they have different needs, and that's what has to be focused on.
What would you say out of all those years for you, Richard, the most rewarding part? Everything. We're looking at everything right here of being an urban planner. What really stands out for you that you're proud of?
Well, I've told you before, my first project was a neighborhood, low-income minority neighborhood in one of the townships, and they had a couple of little roads that were either not fully improved or that did not connect to the surrounding road network. And I worked with the neighborhood folks there, and we developed what was called the Rahway Avenue Improvement Project, which talked about extending the main road to connect to the surrounding street pattern, and also dealing with some vacant properties and promoting the idea of infill development, and that would fill the holes where some of these vacant properties and adjacent vacant land were located.
How does that feel for you when you're driving down the street, you go into town, and there's something that you made a mark on when it came to planning over the years? I can't even imagine what that would feel like, just seeing these projects. Yeah, I remember working on that one. Yeah, I remember that one over there, that transportation hub. I remember that over there.
I remember ones which didn't work. At least I thought they were pretty good projects, like developing a land around one of the commuter rail stations. And it took forever to get the project started. And now I can see some of these things being developed. But I was working at SEPTA at the time, the public transit agency in the Philadelphia area, and I went to a public meeting and said, well, we want to try to develop the station area. It's called transit-oriented development, and we would like to build a 300-space parking garage here to capture people before they drive into Philadelphia, to get them right on the public transit system, the rail line. And it produced a lot of negative reaction, that it's too big a project for the neighborhood and for the Ardmore area, and that it failed. The township commissioners decided not to advance that project. Can
be deflating, because when you believe in something, you put your all into it, and then years later, driving by, I know my brain would be thinking, you guys just didn't get it.
Ironically, the station is being improved now. I'm not clear on whether it's going to have a multi-level parking garage. I probably will, but it's definitely an improvement, and it just took about 20-plus years to finally get moving.
Yep. Well, good things take time. Wonderful having you here, and I want to tell everybody, if you have a question for Richard, whether it's career-connected or otherwise, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com is the best way to reach us. As always, Richard, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for all your insight and all your dedication over many, many decades.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks. Good talking to you again.
You too. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.